everybody, Nullface here in Eternal Evolution, talking a little bit more about Twilight Lands. I did a speed run earlier today and got through it as quickly as possible because the patch notes were honestly very unclear about how the rewards were going to work and whether the first 15 chapters counted once you got into chapter 16 or not. So just in case, I figured go ahead, get through it as quickly as possible. I did, completed it in about 4.5 hours. Currently sitting first place on the server. Like I said, I don't know if these rankings actually mean anything, but as you can see, a bunch of people still pushing because we're we're not really sure if it works or not, or if it matters or not. But regardless, a few new things have come into play in Twilight here. So unfortunately, I don't have recordings of the stages themselves, but I've created some of the formations, and I'll talk through a couple of the different teams that I used on some of the stages that caused particular grief for people. So we'll switch over to the formations here and go through a few of those. All right, so we got a few teams here. First one, Vanguard Bond. As expected, most things are going to include Nord. I threw him in here because the healing, I used to run basically Serena instead, right? 3 Vanguards, 2 healers. But I find Nord to be very useful in crowd controlling the guys in the back row. In this case, it was the Lukes. I think I only had to fight Vanguard Bond once this time around. But he did a lot of work, obviously a lot of damage, and still did really well at keeping the Luke's CC'd knockdown. So just one more source of that. And with the additional CC, didn't really need the healing too much, so it ended up working out pretty well. Next up, the Hunter Bond. I didn't do this very often. The Hunter Bonds got kind of dicey at the end. You can also swap Nord out for Leo in this team too, and that works pretty well as well. I would advise changing up the commander and probably run Flowing Rune if you're doing that, depending on which scenario it is. If you want more Nordalts, go Flowing Rune. If you want more Hunter damage, you can choose Fifth Element or Red Thorn or one of the other Hunter prototypes that you have. Kind of whatever you have on hand. Remember, all the Hagridon does work for Nord too, so if he needs just a little bit more tankiness, that can be a good boost for him too. The summon team was pretty standard. I used the same team for my usual story clear. Just these 5, like literally just this team, dumped it into summoner bonds and it was fine all the way through. I didn't have any issues there. The only change there is I stopped running Square Hattie and Senway, and I'm just running Anpu Surveilly because things do seem like they hit a little bit harder this time. It seemed like that each time, to be honest. The damage just kind of picks up a little bit. All right, just gone through those. Now onto the energy team. I think this will be pretty much the end of the regular teams that I used, and this very pretty standard energy team, honestly. It's just Leo and Nord doing most of the work, and then Luke and Ravenna cleaning up the scraps, but it's those two out in front, and Nord does Nord things. You've all seen him at this point. It's just kind of ridiculous and went very smoothly. Did have to restart a couple of times because occasionally he just gets nuked right at the very beginning before he can get going, but other than that, pretty safe. Those were most of the stages. I did not do any generalist bonds. I think it was all Hunter, Summoner, lots of energy as usual. That's the easy one now, and a couple of Vanguards in there. So beyond that, a few of the boss teams. So I was using this for my Hunter 10, basically the 10th stage, the Hunter boss. I positioned those 2 in the middle, toss these guys in the back. Daniel's there for CC. Leo's there for Leo things. Again, Nord works probably better. I didn't actually try him in this team because it worked. The only time that I did trade this out was for the 1410 boss. I actually ran summoners in there. The hunters just couldn't seem to survive, even with Emma at Summit 90. So took them out, put in summoners, and just like you always do with summoners, it just kind of worked. That's what summoners do. Things just kind of work. The energy boss mini stages, use this team for the blobs. I believe it was the same group for the ones that split. So to me, the blobs are the red ones. They spawn little explodey dudes. Nord just wipes them out. Then we've got Luke Ravenna there to do some cleanup if needed. Easy peasy though. Was not a problem at all. And same with the ones that split into the million little like shooting spider dudes. Having 3 energy heroes with Nord just wiped them out very easily. So those were pretty simple this time. The 12-7 tank bond. I don't have any tanks yet, so I just ran Leo, Nord. We'll make the team. We'll create a formation here. I ran Leo, Masrani, basically double healer, Nord, and Rez. And then Serena would be the last one in here. And I would have tossed on a Hagridon. This guy's pretty good. Leo and Rez alt. Of course, if you're running Hagridon, generally want to run Pain Rune. You could also try Flowing if you wanted more Nord alts. And this would be the team. Now, Tank Bond is way better if you have tanks. This was kind of sketchy, to be honest. It was definitely close. Almost lost both Leo and Nord. They just would get their clutch heals off at the very, very last second and survive. So I just kind of brute forced my way through it. 12-7 is the last one of those in the first 15 chapters. So if you can make it through that, you're clear. But this was probably the second most challenging mini boss that I had to go through. We'll discard those. All right, we'll talk about, let's see, blobs, energy 10. This was my team for the 10th stage of pretty much all the battles that were the energy bosses. Sorry, all the chapters that had energy bosses. I have Crete here from the previous Twilight, where I would use the strategy because it's the birds, right? You got the 2 birds in front of the boss. I would jump Crete over the birds onto the far side, and then he would just sit there and be a brick. And that was his job, just sit there and take damage and don't die, and he did it well. The thing about Leo is when he does his spins back and forth through the birds, it can sometimes point them at the team, then the team dies, and that's no good. So Crete kind of solved that problem for me. His positioning was a little weird this time, but it still ended up working out. So I was still able to just manual his first ult, get him over the birds. Not into the same spot as before, but close enough, I guess. And then after that, you can just turn on auto alt, and he'll never come back across the birds, at least not in my experience. Then running Nautilus for the multi-hit on there. I think in the end I had swapped them like this, so Nord could have better access. So I'll actually save this here. Did run Hagridon, Flowing Rune, and those 2 Protos, but this team just absolutely destroyed the Energy 10 stage. They're all immortal. I think Nautilus isn't anything special. But yeah, he's just immortal 1. I did throw him in a realm set though, so that he could do a little bit more damage to summons, and that helps just nuke that ad down pretty quickly. But Nord also does that just by being Nord, so there was really no problem there. All right. Now we have the 2 challenging ones. We'll say they used to be 14-4 and 14-7. Now they're 15-4 and 15-7. And those are the hunter bosses, hunter mini bosses. So this was my team for the horsey, the lightning horse, 15-4. And this took longer than most of them did, for sure. Definitely the most retries of any of the stages. But Nord was able to sustain as well as contribute significantly to the damage and control both the Sorietta and the Omar in the backline, as well as being tanky enough with his tanky enough in the Marauder set with his just regular abilities that I didn't need to run a commander for him. And the commander here is key. So Karmota, this hunter attack, this is actually pretty crazy. And I don't have footage of this in Twilight, but I do have some in an Elite chapter that I was messing around with him in the other day. Or not Elite chapter, sorry, Elite campaign. So as soon as we're done looking at the teams here, I'll show that. Just as an example of the damage that this guy lets the rest of the team do. But this true damage here is really, really impactful when the bosses have such high defense, right? And in chapter 15, they really do have high defense, but I was able to use Xena and Emma, basically just hold their ults until the shield came up. It just barely survived to do a third shield. It was on like a fraction of health, but I didn't want to risk ulting to kill it, because if it popped the shield and I didn't quite kill it, then I would have had to start all over again. Res primarily targeted Nord, but I did pump Maserani to heal up a couple of times too, and I did have to switch both Emma and Xena into DR boots. But even losing the attack boots with Karmota's damage and running 5th element for a little more attack speed, I was able to drop the shield no problem. The first time I think it was 2 Emma ults, the second time it was a second ult on Nord because I wanted to CC the Soriad and the Omar. But that's the nice thing about Res, you can kind of decide who should be, who should get the boost. But this team did 15-4. Like I said, I won't say easily. I'm sure if I had a EX30 Xena, she's only at 20 Hyper Evolve, that would have probably pushed me over the top for damage. But they got through it and didn't die. Didn't lose anyone there, so that was pretty cool. Then I didn't actually save the team, so we'll just swap it up here a little bit. Bye. No. For 15-7 is the old Forest Guardian, the Crete, Oisa, and Langal shield trio. For that, same commander again. All I did was I took Raz out, and I put in Prior and Moriami. Prior's up here. So this was the team for that. Again, prototypes, you could use 5th element, you could use Flowing Rune, you could probably use Red Thorn. It kind of depends on what you have. I was fortunate enough to actually have a maxed out Red Thorn. But this group absolutely melted the shields. I think it took 2 tries, because I tried with Leo first, and that didn't work. It didn't work very well. But as soon as I put Nord in the front, he didn't even need res boosting him to stay alive. I was still able to sustain just fine through that. Added some control for keeping Crete off the rest of the team, as did, again, Karmota. Huge bonuses from this commander. The true damage is good, and since there are 3 hunters, the pushback was almost always good. There were a couple of times where I did position them a little awkwardly, but I think 2 tries just to make sure I could get the positioning right, and that stage just melted. And it made me really happy inside because I struggled so hard with this last time. So that was pretty awesome. For anyone who may not be convinced about Karmota, I'm going to cut away here for a second, show you those clips from Elite Campaign, one with Hagridon as sort of a control group, and then tossing in Karmota, and we're looking at trying to complete it in 45 seconds, because that's the 3 stars for that. So let me show you those clips, and we'll come back in just a second. crazy, right? The damage from that commander alone is absurd. It doesn't parse to the commander; it shows from the heroes themselves, so it's impossible to see his actual contribution. But it is pretty cool. Once I started to appreciate that a little bit, I'm like, this guy's gonna make his way into a couple of those Twilight teams, and sure enough, he did. And with those, that was really able to clear it. Nord, of course, did have a big impact. Not gonna say he didn't. He was huge in a lot of the teams, but the old teams are still valid in the previous videos that I will also link here. Those are still good. This are just some more optimizations that let me get through it without needing a couple of days, without needing even the first reset. And a lot of it is those hunter stages, and really it is due to this commander. That's how I was able to get through it. So definitely, if you're stuck on those, make use of this guy. It does a huge damage boost. Very helpful for the teams, so highly recommend it. If there are other stages that you have questions about, haven't covered, please let me know in the comments. Try to keep an eye on that. Happy to answer any other questions. In the meantime, I hope this was helpful. I do wish I had more video. If the initial ranking doesn't end up mattering, I'll try to do better videos for these when Twilight cycles through again next time, and have a little bit more detail on them, and I can kind of take my time. But for now, that's all I got. Hope it was helpful. Thank you for watching, and take care.